The marble floor of the great hall gleamed under the light of 100 candles, each reflection a small window into a past Elara Frost had spent 20 years trying to forget. Her hands moved in practiced circles, the rough bristles of the scrub brush finding every groove in the stone. The motion was mechanical now, effortless, the kind of work that required no thought, which was precisely why she had chosen it. Around her, the massive chamber stretched toward vaulted ceilings where ancient banners hung like ghosts of victories long turned to dust. The Northern Pack's sigil dominated the space, a silver wolf beneath 3 stars. Once she had marched under those stars. Once she had believed they meant something. The water in her bucket had gone cold an hour ago. She should have replaced it, but the chill against her reddened knuckles felt appropriate somehow. Penance had many forms. This was merely the one she had grown accustomed to. Outside, beyond the reinforced walls of the pack house, the forest whispered with the movements of wolves preparing for the evening shift change. Guards rotating, patrols forming up, the machinery of security that never slept, never faltered. She could hear their boots on the stone courtyards, the low murmur of orders being given and acknowledged. Once, she had been the one giving those orders. Lieutenant Elara Frost of the Eastern Territories, commander of the Southern Pass garrison, the woman they had called Winter's Blade before the fire came and turned everything to ash. That woman was dead. The one who scrubbed floors in her place had learned to keep her head down, her eyes lowered, her past buried deep where it could not hurt anyone else. 18 years old when the war found her. 38 now, with 2 decades of silence worn into her bones like grooves in old wood. A door opened somewhere behind her. The sound carried differently in the great hall when it was empty like this, the acoustics turning every noise into something larger than itself. Footsteps followed, not the hurried shuffle of servants rushing to complete their duties before curfew. These were measured, confident, the stride of someone who had never needed to make themselves small. Elara did not look up. Servants did not look up when their betters passed. It was a rule she had learned early and followed without exception. Invisibility was its own kind of armor. The footsteps stopped. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and expectant. Her hands continued their work, though something in her spine had gone rigid. An old instinct. The kind soldiers developed when something was wrong, but they could not yet identify the threat. "You missed a spot." The voice was deep, resonant in a way that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. She knew that voice. Everyone in the Northern Territories knew that voice. King Theron Stone, Alpha of Alphas, ruler of the largest werewolf pack in the Northern Hemisphere. Elara kept her eyes on the floor. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I will correct it immediately. 3 feet to your left, near the base of the 3rd column." Her gaze flicked to the spot he indicated. He was right. A small smudge, barely visible in the candlelight. The kind of detail most people would never notice. The kind of detail a military commander would catalog automatically. She moved to the column, repositioning her bucket and brush. The king had not moved. She could feel his presence like heat from a forge, impossible to ignore even without looking directly at the source. "How long have you been in service to this pack?" The question hung in the air between them. A simple inquiry on the surface, something else underneath. 20 years, Your Majesty." 20 years. He repeated the words as though tasting them for hidden meaning. That would place your arrival at the end of the border wars. It was not a question, but it demanded an answer nonetheless. "Yes, Your Majesty. I came seeking refuge when the fighting displaced my family." "From the Eastern Territories." Her hand stilled on the brush for half a heartbeat before resuming its motion. Such a small tell. A trained observer would have caught it. "Yes, Your Majesty." Silence again. Longer this time. She could hear him breathing, slow and controlled. The kind of breathing that came from decades of discipline, from learning to master the beast that lived beneath the skin. "Stand up." The command was gentle, but it was a command nonetheless. Elara set down her brush and rose to her feet, keeping her gaze fixed on a point roughly at chest height. Not his face. Never his face. That would be a challenge, and she had no interest in challenges. King Theron Stone was 45 years old, though he wore the years like battle scars rather than burdens. Tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of physical presence that came not from bulk, but from perfect economy of motion. His face was all sharp angles and weathered lines, the kind earned through hard decisions rather than age. Dark hair shot through with silver at the temples, eyes the color of amber, bright and assessing. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "What is your name?" "Elara, Your Majesty." "Elara." He said it slowly, as though committing it to memory. "No family name?" "I am a servant, Your Majesty. We have no need of such things." A slight smile touched his mouth, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "How old are you, Elara?" 38, Your Majesty." He nodded slowly, as though confirming something to himself. Then he did something entirely unexpected. He moved to one of the long wooden tables that lined the hall and sat, gesturing to the bench across from him. "Sit." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain the careful distance she had cultivated for 2 decades. But one did not refuse a direct order from an Alpha King, not if one wished to continue breathing. She sat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap, the posture of someone prepared to receive judgment. Theron leaned back slightly, his amber eyes never leaving her face. "I have been researching you for 3 months." The words hit like physical blows. Elara forced herself to remain still, to show nothing. But inside, the careful walls she had built began to crack. "Your Majesty, I do not understand." "I think you do." His voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath. 3 months ago, I was conducting a routine inspection of the servant quarters. I saw you carrying water from the well, the way you moved, the way you scanned the courtyard before crossing, the way you positioned yourself with clear lines of sight to all potential approaches. He paused. "Those are not the movements of someone who has spent 20 years scrubbing floors." Elara said nothing. What could she say? "So I began asking questions," Theron continued, quietly, to people who would not gossip. "I learned that you arrived in the autumn of the year the war ended, that you requested the most menial positions available, that you have, for 2 decades, made yourself as invisible as it is possible for a person to be." He leaned forward. "I also learned that despite having no formal education listed in your records, you can read and write in 3 languages, including military tactical notation." The bottom fell out of her world. One of the library scribes noted that someone had been reviewing old war records late at night when the archive was supposed to be empty. Battle plans, troop movements, strategic analyses, always carefully returned to their exact positions. His eyes narrowed. "At first I thought perhaps we had a spy, but spies do not spend 20 years as servants. Spies do not scrub floors and empty chamber pots. Spies do not disappear so thoroughly into the fabric of daily life that even the Alpha King forgets they exist." Elara's throat had gone dry. She forced herself to meet his gaze, abandoning the pretense of submission. "What do you want?" The question came out harder than she intended, 20 years of careful control cracking under the weight of being seen. Theron's expression did not change. "The Southern Coalition is mobilizing for war." 5 words, a death sentence dressed in diplomatic language. "The Southern Coalition has been defeated," Elara heard herself say. "Their Supreme Alpha was killed. Their territories absorbed. There is no Southern Coalition." "There was no Southern Coalition," Theron corrected, past tense. But dead things have a way of coming back to life when the circumstances are right. New leadership has emerged. Young wolves who were children during the last war, who grew up on stories of their parents' defeat, who believed that victory was stolen from them through treachery rather than lost through combat. Something cold settled in Elara's stomach. "How many?" "Intelligence suggests 5,000 troops currently mobilized, likely twice that number in reserve. 10,000, maybe 15. The numbers rolled through her mind automatically, falling into old patterns of calculation, force ratios, defensive advantages, supply line vulnerabilities. Your own strength? 12,000 able-bodied warriors, but we are spread thin. Garrison duties, border patrols, internal security. We could consolidate, but that would leave our flanks exposed to opportunistic raids from smaller packs." He paused. "We need someone who understands how the Southern Coalition thinks, how they fight, someone who has beaten them before." Understanding crashed over her like a wave. "No, Lieutenant Frost." The name hung between them like a blade. Her old name, her real name, the one she had buried with the rest of her past. "That woman is dead." "Is she?" Theron's voice remained level. "Because the woman I have been watching for 3 months moves like a warrior trying very hard to forget she was trained for violence, stands like someone who spent years holding a command position, observes terrain the way a tactical mind catalogues threats and advantages." He stood, his presence filling the space. "I do not need a princess who has been hiding in my household for 20 years. I need the woman who held Southern Pass with 500 troops against 5,000 for 6 months. I need Lieutenant Frost." Elara rose as well, her hands clenched at her sides. "You do not know what you are asking. I am asking you to save lives, to use the knowledge and experience you have spent 2 decades trying to bury, to do what you were trained to do." "I was trained to kill." The words came out raw. "And everyone I was trained with is dead. Everyone I commanded is dead. I sent them into battles they could not win and told them it was for honor and duty and the greater good. And when the fire came and the walls fell, I survived because someone else died in my place." Her voice cracked. "So no, Your Majesty. You do not want me. You want the memory of someone who never existed." Theron watched her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and withdrew a leather portfolio, placing it on the table between them. "These are the projected casualty figures if war comes and we face it with our current defensive strategy." Elara did not want to look, did not want to see the numbers that would drag her back into the nightmare she had spent 2 decades escaping, but her eyes betrayed her, dropping to the documents spread across the wood. 3,000 dead, minimum, possibly 5,000 if the campaign extended beyond initial engagements. "These are not just numbers," Theron said quietly. "These are fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, wolves who have lived their entire lives in peace, who know nothing of large-scale warfare, who will die because their commanders do not have the experience to keep them alive." He gestured to the papers. "Unless someone who does have that experience is willing to step forward." The weight of it pressed down on her like stones. All those lives, all those deaths waiting to happen unless she became the thing she had sworn never to be again. "I cannot." "Can you live with yourself if you do not?" The question cut deeper than any blade. Because he was right. Damn him, he was right. She could scrub 1,000 floors, empty 1,000,000 chamber pots, bury herself so deep in servitude that the world forgot she existed. But she would know. Every death, every casualty, every name on the list that would be read when the fighting was done, she would know she could have prevented it. This was not about honor. Honor was a luxury for people who had not watched everyone they loved burn. This was about the simple, terrible math of necessity. 3,000 lives against her own peace, her own ability to sleep without seeing the faces of the dead. It was not even a choice. "I need guarantees." Her voice was flat. "Full tactical authority, no political interference in combat decisions. And when it is over, I disappear. No recognition, no rewards. I go back to being no one." Theron's expression shifted, something like respect flickering across his features. "Agreed, with one modification." "Which is?" "You attend the War Council meeting tonight as a full member. The Pack needs to see that you have my complete confidence." "The Pack needs to see nothing. My value is in my knowledge, not my visibility." "Your value is in both." Theron's tone hardened. "I need my commanders to trust your judgment. That requires them to know who you are and what you have accomplished. Otherwise, you are just a servant the king elevated on a whim." "Better that than the truth." "The truth is coming whether you want it or not, Lieutenant. The question is whether it comes on your terms or someone else's." Before Elara could respond, the massive doors at the far end of the great hall swung open. 2 figures entered, both carrying themselves with the easy confidence of people accustomed to power. The woman was tall and striking, with copper hair pulled back in a severe braid. Lady Morgana Silverclaw, the king's chief advisor. Her green eyes swept the room, noting the king sitting at a table with a servant, and narrowed fractionally. The man beside her was broader, heavier through the shoulders, military bearing evident in every line of his body. General Damon Silverclaw, commander of the Northern Pack's armed forces, brother to Morgana, and by all accounts a brilliant tactical mind. They approached with matching expressions of polite inquiry that did not quite mask their confusion. "Your Majesty," Morgana's voice carried the crisp tones of formal court speech. "The War Council convenes in 1 hour. We came to review the preliminary reports before the full assembly." Theron stood, his posture shifting into something more regal. "Excellent timing. I would like you to meet Lieutenant Elara Frost of the Eastern Territories. She will be joining us for the council meeting." The temperature in the room dropped. Morgana's eyes locked onto Elara, assessment and dismissal happening in the span of a heartbeat. "A servant at the War Council? Surely this is some jest." "No jest." Theron's voice allowed no room for argument. Lieutenant Frost has agreed to provide her expertise regarding Southern Coalition tactics. Given that we face the possibility of renewed conflict with that region, I deemed her knowledge valuable. Demon stepped forward, his gaze sharp and probing. Frost. He repeated the name slowly. That designation is familiar. It should be, Theron replied. Lieutenant Frost commanded the Southern Pass garrison during the final phase of the border wars. Her defensive strategies are still studied in our military academies. The silence that followed had weight and texture. Elara could feel the moment when recognition hit, when memory aligned with present reality and produced something close to shock. Winter's blade. Demon breathed the words like a prayer or a curse. You were at Southern Pass. I was. We thought everyone died when the fortress fell. Almost everyone did. His eyes moved over her face, searching for something. What, she could not say. Then how are you here? Someone gave their life so I could escape. The words came out flat. Statement of fact, devoid of emotion. I have been here ever since. Morgana's expression had shifted from dismissal to calculation. If Lieutenant Frost's identity has been concealed for 20 years, revealing it now seems unnecessarily risky. There are those who might view her survival as abandonment of duty, others who might question why she has hidden rather than serve openly. Those questions can be addressed. Theron's tone made it clear the discussion was over. For now, what matters is her knowledge. The Southern Coalition moves against us. We need every advantage. The Southern Coalition is broken, Morgana insisted. Their leadership dead, their territories absorbed. This is saber-rattling at most. Intelligence suggests otherwise. Intelligence. Demon's voice carried a strange edge. May I ask the source of this intelligence? Multiple sources, border scouts, trade contacts, intercepted communications. Communications from a defeated enemy that was supposedly destroyed 2 decades ago. The general's expression was unreadable. Forgive me, Your Majesty, but that seems unlikely. Which is why we need someone who understands how they think. Theron gestured to Elara. Lieutenant Frost spent 6 months fighting them. If anyone can assess the validity of these threats, it is her. Something passed across Demon's face then. Too quick to identify, but there nonetheless. Elara had spent enough years reading men's expressions in combat to recognize the look of someone whose carefully constructed plans had just encountered an unexpected variable. Of course. The general inclined his head. I look forward to hearing the lieutenant's assessment. It will be good to have a warrior of her caliber at the table. The words were correct, the delivery flawless, but underneath something rang false. Theron seemed not to notice, or perhaps chose not to acknowledge it. Excellent. Lieutenant Frost will require appropriate quarters and access to our war archives. See that it is arranged. Your Majesty. Morgana's protest was carefully measured. Perhaps it would be wise to have the lieutenant observed while she reviews sensitive materials. Given the length of her concealment, we cannot be certain of her loyalties. Her loyalties are to this pack. Theron's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. She has lived among us for 20 years. That earns a measure of trust. Or a measure of suspicion, Morgana countered. 20 years is a long time to maintain a deception. One wonders what purpose such prolonged concealment might serve. Elara met the other woman's gaze directly. I concealed myself to avoid exactly this, to avoid being pulled back into the machinery of war, to exist in peace rather than prepare for the next battle. She paused. But your king is correct. If war comes, and I possess knowledge that could save lives, I have an obligation to provide it. That does not make me a spy or a traitor. It makes me someone who has seen too much death and wishes to prevent more. The words hung in the air, simple and direct. Morgana studied her for a long moment, then inclined her head fractionally. I hope you are right, Lieutenant, for all our sakes. The War Council chamber occupied the heart of the pack house, a circular room with stone walls and a domed ceiling. A large table dominated the space, its surface carved with an intricate map of the territories. 5 major packs, dozens of smaller clans, mountain ranges and river systems, and the great forests that separated civilization from wilderness. Elara stood near the entrance, watching as the room filled with commanders and advisors. 7 in total, not counting the king. Each represented a major faction within the Northern Pack's power structure. Old families with long histories, warriors who had earned their positions through combat, civilians who had proven themselves in administration and logistics. Elder Cassius Gray entered last, moving with the careful precision of a man who had seen 68 winters and felt every one of them. His hair was white as fresh snow, his face a topographic map of wrinkles earned through decades of hard living. But his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Those eyes found Elara immediately, and something like recognition sparked in their depths. Not surprise, recognition, as though he had been expecting this moment for a very long time. He crossed to her directly, ignoring the stares of the other council members. "Lieutenant Frost." His voice was rough, like stones grinding together. "It has been a long time."
"Elder Cassius," she inclined her head. "I did not know you had survived."
"I could say the same." A faint smile touched his weathered features, "though I suspect our reasons for survival differ." Before she could respond, Theron entered the chamber, his presence commanding immediate silence. He moved to the head of the table, Morgana and Damon taking positions at his right and left respectively. "Thank you all for coming on short notice." The king's voice carried easily through the space. "We face a situation that requires immediate assessment and planning. The Southern Coalition, which we believed broken, appears to be reforming under new leadership. Intelligence suggests they are mobilizing forces for potential military action." Murmurs rippled through the gathered commanders. Shock, disbelief, calculation. "That is impossible." One of the generals, a scarred veteran named Marcus, leaned forward. "We destroyed their command structure, absorbed their territories. Their pack lines were broken." "Pack lines can be rebuilt," Theron replied. "Leadership can emerge from unexpected places. What we believed buried has returned." He gestured to Elara. "This is Lieutenant Elara Frost. Some of you may recognize the name. She commanded the Southern Pass garrison during the final phase of the border wars. She has agreed to provide tactical consultation regarding this threat." Every eye in the room fixed on her. Elara forced herself to stand straight, to meet their gazes without flinching. This was the moment Theron had warned her about. The moment her past and present collided in a way that could not be undone. "Winter's Blade," Marcus breathed. "I heard you died at Southern Pass." "Nearly," Elara kept her voice level, "but not quite." "Why have you hidden for 20 years? Another commander, younger and suspicious. "If you survived, why not step forward? Take a position befitting your rank?" "Because I had seen enough of war." The answer was simple, true. "I wanted peace. I wanted to be no one. That is not a crime." "It is if you possessed knowledge that could have aided the pack," the young commander pressed. "How many strategic insights did you keep to yourself while pretending to be a servant?" "None that were relevant." Elara met his challenge directly. "There was no war, no threat, only the slow work of rebuilding. I saw no reason to resurrect a past that served no purpose." "And now?" "Now circumstances have changed." She turned to face the table, to the map carved into its surface. "If the Southern Coalition is truly mobilizing, then my knowledge becomes relevant. And however much I might wish otherwise, I cannot ignore that." Damon leaned forward, his expression unreadable. Perhaps the lieutenant could share her assessment of our current defensive posture, given her expertise. It was a test. Elara recognized it immediately. He wanted to see if she truly possessed the tactical acumen her reputation suggested, or if she was merely a name attached to legends that had grown in the telling. She moved to the table, studying the carved map. Supply routes, defensive positions, the natural choke points that determine the flow of military campaigns. "Your primary defensive line is here," she indicated the southern border. 3 major fortifications with supporting garrisons, standard doctrine for territorial defense. "And your assessment?" "It will fail." The bluntness of her statement sent another ripple through the room. Demon's eyes narrowed. "Explain." "The Southern Coalition, assuming they are following their historical patterns, will not engage your fortifications directly. They will probe for weaknesses, conduct raids, force you to spread your forces thin, responding to multiple threats. Then, when your defensive line is stretched to the breaking point, they will commit their full force at a single point of maximum vulnerability." She traced a line on the map with her finger. "Here, the Western Gap. It is lightly defended because the terrain makes large-scale troop movements difficult, but difficult is not impossible. And if they commit to it, if they are willing to accept the casualties required to force that passage, they can bypass your entire defensive network and strike directly at your population centers." Silence. "How do you know this?" The young commander's voice was tight. "Because it is what I would do." Elara straightened. "Because I fought them for 6 months and learned how they think. They value mobility over static defense, speed over attrition. They will trade casualties for strategic advantage without hesitation. She looked at Damon. Your current deployment assumes they will behave rationally, that they will not sacrifice troops for gains that seem disproportionate. But that assumption is wrong. They will sacrifice everything if they believe it serves their ultimate objective.
Damon studied the map, his expression thoughtful. If we reinforce the western gap, we weaken our primary defensive line.
Yes.
And if we maintain our current posture? You lose 3,000 troops in the first week when they punch through at the gap and roll up your defenses from behind. The number hung in the air like an executioner's blade. 3,000. Not a possibility. A certainty delivered with the flat confidence of someone who had run the calculations countless times in her mind. You seem very certain.
Morgana's voice carried an edge. Perhaps overly so for someone who has been removed from military affairs for 2 decades.
Tactics do not change, Elara replied.
Terrain does not change. Human nature, or wolf nature in this case, does not change. The Southern Coalition will do what the Southern Coalition has always done. The only question is whether we will be prepared for it.
Elder Cassius spoke for the first time since the briefing began.
The lieutenant is correct. I fought alongside her unit during the defense of Southern Pass. I witnessed firsthand how the Coalition operates. They are not concerned with conventional measures of victory. They seek total commitment, absolute effort toward their objectives. To understand them is to understand that they will not stop until they achieve their goals or are completely destroyed.
Then we destroy them, Marcus growled. Preemptive strike. Hit them before they can mobilize fully.
No, Theron's voice cut through the room. We are not aggressors. We do not strike first against an enemy that has not yet acted against us.
Then we wait for them to kill our people?
We prepare. The king's tone allowed no argument. Lieutenant Frost will work with General Damon to revise our defensive strategy. We will fortify the western gap without abandoning our primary positions, and we will hope that the intelligence is wrong, that the coalition is not truly mobilizing. He paused. But we will not gamble with the lives of our pack on hope alone. Nods around the table, agreement forged from necessity rather than enthusiasm. There is one more matter. Theron's voice took on a formal quality. Lieutenant Frost's identity and her service record must be made public. The pack needs to know that we have a warrior of her caliber among us. That knowledge alone may serve as a deterrent.
Or a target,
Morgana interjected. If the coalition learns she survived, they may view her as a threat that must be eliminated. Let them try. Cassius's voice was iron. Let them send their assassins and their spies. Let them learn what it means to threaten one of our own. The room erupted in voices, arguments cascading over each other. Elara stood silent amid the chaos, watching as her carefully constructed anonymity dissolved like smoke. 20 years of peace traded for a return to the world of violence and strategy and the endless calculations of who would live and who would die. This was what leadership looked like. Not glory, not honor, just hard choices and the weight of consequences. Theron raised a hand and silence fell. The decision is made. Lieutenant Frost will be formally recognized at tomorrow's assembly. Until then, she has full access to our war archives and strategic planning chambers. General Damon, you will coordinate with her on defensive revisions. His amber eyes swept the room. We do not want this war, but if it comes, we will be ready. The council members filed out, their expressions ranging from determined to troubled. Elara remained, suddenly exhausted by the weight of what she had just accepted. Cassius approached, his weathered face gentle. It is good to see you alive, child. I am not sure I can say the same. The words were bitter. I thought I was done with this. We are never done with what we are. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the grip surprisingly strong. You were born for war, Elara. That is both curse and gift. The question is not whether you will fight, but whether you will fight for something worth the sacrifice.
And what is that?
The lives of those who cannot fight for themselves, the future of children who deserve to grow up without war, the hope that perhaps this time we can end a conflict without repeating the mistakes of the past. Before she could respond, Theron approached, having dismissed the last of the council members. That went better than I expected. Because they saw the strategic value, Elara's voice was flat. Not because they trust me. Trust is earned through action. You will have opportunities. I do not want opportunities. I want to solve this problem and disappear again. That may not be possible. Theron's expression was grave. The moment your identity becomes public, you become a symbol. Symbols are difficult to put back in bottles once released. Then perhaps you should have left me in obscurity. I could not. Simple words, absolute conviction. Not when your knowledge could save lives. Elara looked at him, this king who had pulled her from the shadows and thrust her back into the light. There was no triumph in his expression, only the same weariness she felt, the burden of command worn like chains. If war comes, she said quietly, many will die regardless of what I do or do not know. You understand that? I do. And you can live with that? No. Theron's voice was soft but clear. But I will carry it nonetheless, as will you. That is what leaders do. We carry the weight so others do not have to. The words settled over her like a familiar cloak. How many times had she told herself something similar? How many deaths had she justified with the arithmetic of necessity? She was about to respond when rapid footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Finn Walker, captain of the King's Guard, burst through the door. His face was pale, expression urgent. Your Majesty, Elder Kavos requests an immediate private audience. He says it concerns sensitive intelligence regarding the Southern Coalition. Theron's expression sharpened. How immediate? He is waiting in your private study. He insists it cannot wait. The king exchanged glances with Elara and Cassius. Very well, Lieutenant Elder Cassius with me. They followed Finn through winding corridors to Theron's private chambers. The study was a smaller, more intimate space lined with books and maps. Elder Kavos stood by the window, his 78-year-old frame rigid with tension. He turned as they entered, his eyes moving from Theron to Elara and back again. Your Majesty, I must speak plainly. There is information the Council needs to know, information that has been buried for 20 years. Theron's voice was carefully neutral. Speak. Kavos's gaze locked onto Elara. The fall of Southern Pass was not simply a military defeat, it was orchestrated. Someone with access to your defensive plans provided intelligence to the Coalition, someone in a position of trust. The air in the room turned electric. You are suggesting a traitor. Theron's words were precise. Within the Eastern Garrison Command. I am suggesting more than that. Kavos stepped forward. I am suggesting that the traitor survived the fall of Southern Pass, and that she stands before you now. The accusation hung between them like a drawn blade. Elara felt the world narrow to a single point of focus. This moment, this choice, how she responded would determine everything that followed. That is a grave accusation, Elder. Cassius's voice was deadly quiet. One you should be prepared to support with evidence. Oh, I have evidence. Kavos reached into his robes and withdrew a leather portfolio. Intercepted communications from 20 years ago. Messages sent from within Southern Pass to Coalition commanders. Battle plans, supply routes, guard rotations. He placed the portfolio on the desk, all signed with the same cipher designation, Winter's Blade. Silence crashed over the room. Elara felt her pulse slow, the old combat calm descending like armor. This was an ambush, carefully planned, expertly executed, and she had walked directly into it. May I see those documents? Her voice was steady. Of course. Kavos's smile was thin. Though I suspect you already know what they contain. She took the portfolio, opening it to reveal pages of carefully preserved communications. The handwriting was precise, military in its efficiency. The content was exactly as described. Intelligence that would have been devastating in enemy hands. And at the bottom of each page, a signature. The same flourish she had used for her official reports. These are forgeries, she stated it as fact rather than defense. Are they? Kavos's expression was skeptical. The handwriting matches samples from your official war journals. The cipher designation is yours. Even the ink composition has been verified as consistent with Eastern Territory military issue from that period. Then someone went to great lengths to create a convincing lie. Or you are lying now. The elder's voice hardened. Perhaps you survived not through fortune, but through collaboration. Perhaps your 20 years of hiding were not about escaping war, but avoiding discovery. And now, conveniently, you emerge just as the Coalition mobilizes again. One wonders if this is coordination, rather than coincidence. Theron stepped forward, his presence filling the space. These are serious allegations, Elder Kavos, but allegations are not proof. The documents could have been created by anyone with access to Lieutenant Frost's handwriting and knowledge of military protocols. True. Kavos inclined his head.
which is why I suggest placing the lieutenant under house arrest until a full investigation can be conducted. If she is innocent, the truth will exonerate her. If she is guilty, we will have contained a threat before it can do further damage." Elara met the elder's gaze directly. There was something in his eyes, not hatred, not triumph, something colder, calculation. "You orchestrated the fall of Southern Pass." The words left her mouth before conscious thought could catch up. But once spoken, their truth resonated through her bones. You needed the Eastern Territories to fall. You needed chaos and defeat. And when I survived, when I disappeared, you thought the truth was buried with the dead. Kavas's expression flickered, just for an instant, but it was enough. "That is absurd." "Is it?" Cassius's voice cut through the tension. "Because I also survived Southern Pass, and I remember things, strange things, contradictory orders, supply shipments that never arrived, intelligence that somehow reached the enemy before we could act on it." His eyes narrowed. At the time, we attributed it to the fog of war. But looking back, with the perspective of years, one begins to see patterns. Patterns seen by desperate old men looking for someone to blame. Kavos's composure was cracking. "I served this pack faithfully for 50 years. "Faithfully," Elara repeated the word. "Or strategically?" She gestured to the portfolio. "These documents are too perfect, too convenient. No one preserves evidence of their own treason for 20 years unless they plan to use it. Which means you created them recently. Which means you knew I was here. Which means you have been watching, waiting." The mask fell away completely then. Kavos's expression shifted into something colder, harder. "Clever," he said quietly. "But cleverness will not save you." His hand moved in a gesture so fast it was almost invisible. The door behind them slammed open, and 6 wolves in military uniforms poured into the room, weapons drawn. But these were not King's Guard. The insignia on their armor was wrong, and their eyes held the flat, dead look of people prepared to follow orders without question. "I am afraid I must insist on the lieutenant's immediate detention." Kavos's voice was calm. "By authority of my position as senior council elder." Theron's hand went to the sword at his waist. "You have no such authority." "I have the authority given to me by necessity." Kavos gestured, and the soldiers advanced. "The pack's security demands that potential traitors be secured. I am simply executing my duty." Cassius moved to stand beside Elara, his aged body still carrying the coiled readiness of a warrior. "This is treason, Kavos." "No." The elder shook his head. "This is preservation. The Southern Coalition mobilizes because I have orchestrated their mobilization. They will attack, and they will be defeated, and in that defeat, the Northern Pack will emerge stronger than ever, unified under proper leadership rather than weak kings who hesitate when action is required." "Proper leadership," Theron's voice was ice. "Meaning you." "Meaning those who understand that peace is purchased with strength, not sentiment." Kavos's expression hardened. "Your father understood this, even if he lacked the will to see it through. I gave him the opportunity. I created the circumstances for the Eastern Territories to fall, for their resources to flow north, for this pack to become dominant. But he hesitated, felt guilt, spent his final years in regret rather than building on victory. The truth crashed down like an avalanche, all of it. The conspiracy that had killed Elara's garrison, the orders that had never made sense, the betrayal that had turned victory into massacre. Kavos had orchestrated everything. Why? The question tore from her throat. Why kill 500 soldiers who trusted their commanders? Because 500 casualties were acceptable compared to 5,000 if the war had continued. His voice was matter-of-fact, discussing arithmetic rather than lives. The Eastern Territories were weak, their pack lines failing, their leaders divided. Better to absorb them through controlled collapse than face prolonged conflict. Your garrison was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Rage, white-hot and pure, flooded through Elara's veins. 20 years of carefully controlled emotion detonating in a single instant. Her hand moved before thought, reaching for a weapon that was not there. Cassius caught her arm. Not like this, his voice was urgent, not on his terms. The soldiers had formed a loose circle, weapons trained. Theron remained motionless, calculating odds and options. Kavas smiled. Take them, all 3. We will sort out the details once they are secure. The soldiers moved forward, and then the world exploded into violence. Theron shifted. One moment he was human. The next, a massive gray wolf stood where the king had been, all muscle and fury and absolute commitment. He hit the nearest soldier before the man could react, jaws closing around his sword arm with crushing force. Cassius moved with surprising speed for his age, sweeping a heavy chair into the path of 2 more attackers. Elara had no weapon, no time, only instinct honed through years of combat. She dropped low, drove her shoulder into a soldier's midsection, used his momentum to send him crashing into another. Came up with his dagger in her hand, the familiar weight settling into her grip like coming home. The study descended into chaos. Theron in wolf form was a force of nature, but 6 trained soldiers were formidable even for an alpha king. Cassius fought with the cunning of experience, but his aged body could not match the raw strength of younger warriors. And Elara moved through them like water through stone, finding gaps, exploiting weaknesses, the old reflexes taking over without conscious thought. This was what she had been, what she had tried so hard to leave behind, a weapon shaped by violence and tempered in blood. A blade slashed at her throat. She twisted, felt it pass close enough to sting, drove her stolen dagger up under the soldier's jaw guard, the angle perfect, the strike lethal. He fell. She was already moving to the next target. The fight could have lasted seconds or hours. Time lost meaning in the flow of combat. There was only motion and counter-motion, threat and response. The ancient dance of survival played out with steel and claw. When silence finally fell, 4 soldiers lay unmoving. 2 had fled. Theron stood over Kavos, massive jaws inches from the elder's throat. Blood matted his silver-gray fur, though none of it appeared to be his own. Cassius leaned against the wall, breathing hard but upright. A cut along his cheek bled freely, but he ignored it. Elara stood in the center of the room, dagger still in hand, her servant's dress torn and spattered with blood that was not hers. The careful facade of 2 decades shattered completely. She looked down at the dead soldier at her feet. Young, maybe 25. Following orders from a superior he had no reason to question. The weight of it settled over her like stones. This was what she was. Not a servant. Not someone who could hide from the past. A killer. A warrior. Someone whose hands remembered violence even when her heart wanted to forget. Theron shifted back to human form, his expression grim. "We need to move, now. Others will have heard the fighting." "Let them come." Cassius straightened, still pressing a hand to his bleeding cheek. "Let the entire pack see what their trusted elder has wrought." "No." Elara's voice was hollow. "He wanted chaos, wanted to destabilize. We give him what he wanted, and everything he said becomes true in the eyes of those who need certainty." "Then what do you suggest?" Theron demanded. She looked at Kavos, still pinned beneath the threat of the king's presence, even in human form. The old wolf met her gaze without fear, only cold calculation. "A trial," she said quietly. "Public, transparent. Let him speak his justification. Let the pack decide if his arithmetic of acceptable casualties is something they wish to embrace." "He will lie," Cassius protested. "Manipulate." "Perhaps." Elara knelt, retrieving the leather portfolio that had started this. "Or perhaps the pack is ready to hear the truth. All of it. Even the ugly parts. Even the parts that make us complicit." Theron studied her for a long moment. "You are willing to have your own past examined? To let them question your survival? If that is the price of truth, then yes." She met his amber eyes. "Because the alternative is to do what Kavos did. Hide the difficult parts, control the narrative, decide for others what they can and cannot handle." She paused. "I will not become what I fought against." Something like respect flickered across the king's features. "Very well. Finn will have heard the commotion. He will be here with reinforcements within minutes. We hold Kavos until the full council can be assembled." He looked down at the elder. "And then we let the pack decide what justice looks like." Kavos laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think they will choose truth over comfort? You think they want to know that their prosperity was built on calculated slaughter? They will bury this, bury me, and nothing will change." "Perhaps." Elara's voice was soft. "Or perhaps they will surprise you. Perhaps people are capable of more than you gave them credit for." "We will see, Lieutenant. We will see." Footsteps pounded in the corridor. Finn burst through the door, sword drawn, a dozen guards at his back. He took in the scene with a single sweep, his expression hardening. "Your Majesty." "Secure Elder Kavos." Theron's voice was ice. He is to be held under maximum security pending trial for conspiracy, treason, and murder. No one speaks to him without my direct authorization." The guards moved immediately, binding the elder's hands with silver chains. Kavos did not resist, simply smiled that cold, calculating smile. As they led him away, he called back over his shoulder, "The Southern Coalition attacks in 3 days, Your Majesty. I made certain of it. You will need every advantage, even ones you do not trust." Then he was gone, and they were left in the wreckage of the study. Blood on the floor, bodies waiting to be removed. The careful order of the pack house shattered like glass. Elara looked down at her hands. They were steady. No tremor, no sign of the violence they had just committed. That was almost worse than shaking. The ease of it, the muscle memory that never forgot. "Lieutenant," Theron's voice pulled her back. "Are you injured?" "No." She met his gaze. "But I think we both know there is no going back now. Whatever I was, whoever I tried to be, it is gone. There is only what remains." "And what is that?" She looked around the study, at Cassius, still bleeding but unbowed, at Theron, bearing the weight of kingship and the burden of his father's sins, at Finn and the guards who had responded without question to protect their leader. "A soldier," she said quietly. "That is all I have ever been, all I will ever be." She straightened, the old discipline settling over her like armor. "The Southern Coalition comes in 3 days. We have work to do." Theron nodded slowly. "Then let us begin." And in that moment, standing amid blood and bodies and the shattered remains of her carefully constructed piece, Elara Frost accepted what she had always known but refused to acknowledge. Some things could not be buried, some truths could not be hidden, and some debts could only be paid in the same currency they were incurred. War was coming, and she would be ready. Dawn found Elara in the war archives, surrounded by maps and reports that told the story of conflicts she had tried to forget. Scholar Lyra worked across the table, her movements efficient as she compiled intelligence assessments. Too efficient, perhaps. The woman's fingers moved across documents with the practiced ease of someone encoding messages rather than simply organizing them. Elara filed the observation away. Trust was a luxury they could not afford. "The border activity reports are consistent," Lyra said without looking up. "Increased scout movements, more frequent probing raids. The pattern suggests preparation for larger operations, or suggests someone wanted us to see preparation." Elara studied a map showing troop concentrations. If Elder Kavos has been orchestrating events, he would need us to believe the threat was real. "You think the coalition might not actually attack?" "I think we verify everything independently." Elara looked at the scholar directly. "Can you contact trade sources in neutral territories? Merchants who move through southern regions without political filters?" Lyra's fingers paused for just a moment before resuming their work. "Perhaps, though gathering that intelligence will take time we may not have." "Make it a priority." The scholar nodded, but something in her expression made Elara uneasy, a calculation behind the professional courtesy. Before she could pursue the thought, Finn entered. "Lieutenant, the king requests your presence. General Demon's questioning has concluded." Elara stood, noting the tension in the captain's shoulders. "How bad?" "You should hear it from King Theron." They found the king in a private meeting room, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. He gestured for her to sit. Demon confirmed everything. The forged orders, Kavos's manipulation, 20 years of guilt for following commands that never came from my father. Theron's voice was tight. "But there is more. 6 months ago, Kavos approached him with intelligence about coalition activity and a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "That when war came, certain strategic decisions would need to be made, difficult decisions that required absolute commitment to the pack's survival." He met her gaze. Demon did not report this conversation, kept it private, waiting. He was being groomed for another betrayal. "Yes." Theron stood, moving to the window. "I have confined him to quarters pending investigation. Not quite arrest, not quite free. But Morgana will not accept this easily. The Silverclaw family is powerful. If they turn against the throne, others will follow." Elara absorbed this, weighing military necessity against political reality. "If it were my decision, I would remove him immediately. But I am not a king. You must balance factors I cannot see." "What would you choose, military security or political stability?" "I would remember that the best alliance means nothing if you lose the war. But I would also remember that a king who sacrifices allies without considering trust becomes no different from Kavos.
She held his gaze. Leadership is choosing which uncertainty you can live with. Silence stretched between them.
Then I choose to trust Morgana.
Theron's voice was firm. Give her 48 hours to investigate. If she finds evidence, she brings it forward. If she finds innocence, I restore Demon fully.
And if Morgana is also compromised? Then we have already lost.
His expression hardened. But I will not become a tyrant who trusts no one. That is surrender of a different kind.
Before Elara could respond, a guard burst in. Your Majesty, incident at the Western Water Facility. 2 workers unconscious. Preliminary investigation suggests poison in the supply. The room erupted into action. They ran through corridors to the water treatment facility. Inside, 2 workers lay breathing but unconscious. Beside them, a shattered container that had held clear liquid with the wrong smell. Chemical, designed to be undetectable. Scholar Lyra was already there, examining the substance. Wolfsbane derivative, modified for delayed reaction. Anyone drinking contaminated water would feel effects within 6 hours. She looked up. This required sophisticated chemistry knowledge. How much supply was contaminated? Theron demanded. Unknown. The workers interrupted the saboteur before completion. She gestured to guards. We need to drain and flush the entire network. That will take days. Better than half our troops poisoned. The king's voice was steel. Execute the flush. Establish emergency water sources. And find who did this. The workers saw someone fleeing toward the eastern quarter. A guard reported. Could not identify in darkness.
The eastern quarter, Elara repeated, where former Eastern Territory refugees were housed, where I lived for 20 years. Understanding crashed down. This was not just Demon. Kavos had recruited agents throughout the pack structure, sleeper cells waiting for activation. We need to secure critical infrastructure immediately. She moved to a map. These are the targets. Armory, communications, supply depots. We fortify them now. That is martial law. That is survival. Her voice carried 2 decades of hard truth. Kavos spent 20 years building this conspiracy. We either accept that reality or we die when everything we trust proves false. Theron looked at his commanders, saw fear and denial in slow acceptance.
Execute Lieutenant Frost's plan. Secure critical sites. Detain anyone suspicious. He paused. And pray we find the remaining conspirators before they complete their mission.
The next 30 hours were discovery and betrayal. Explosives hidden in the armory, communication equipment sabotaged, food stores contaminated. Each revelation showed new depths to the conspiracy. And through it all, Damon remained in confinement, silent, refusing cooperation until Morgana came. She entered his quarters alone, brother and sister facing each other across an unbridgeable divide. Tell me it is not true. Damon looked at her with eyes full of regret but not shame. I did what was necessary, what you lacked courage to do.
Courage? She laughed bitterly. You call treason courage?
I call it vision. The pack was dying. Someone needed to make hard choices. He stood. Kavos showed me truth. The Eastern garrison died because they were weak. I will not repeat that mistake.
So you coordinate with our enemies, plan to murder our own people.
I plan to ensure survival when humans discover us, to make us strong enough for what is coming. Morgana's hand moved before thought. The slap echoed sharply. Father was twice the man you will ever be. Father was weak, like King Theron, noble but ineffective. You are no longer my brother. Her voice was ice. You are simply another enemy. She left without waiting for response. In the corridor, Theron waited. You heard? Every word. Her face was drawn. He admits everything. No remorse. I'm sorry. Do not be. She straightened. He kept records, coded, hidden in his personal effects. I can decrypt them, find the remaining agents. How long? Give me until tomorrow evening, before the trial. The council had been assembled for sunset. The pack needed to see justice function even in crisis. The great hall filled with wolves from every faction, several hundred strong, the air thick with tension and betrayal. Kavos was brought in chains. He moved with dignity despite his bonds. No fear, only certainty that history would vindicate him. Theron stood before the assembly, his presence commanding silence. We are gathered to determine justice. Elder Kavos stands accused of conspiracy, treason, and murder, of orchestrating the fall of Southern Pass 20 years ago, of manipulating events to serve his personal vision. He paused. These accusations strike at the heart of trust that binds pack together. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The accused will speak in his defense. Witnesses will testify.
Evidence will be presented, and when all has been heard, the council will render judgment." He gestured to Kavos. "Elder, how do you answer these charges?" The old wolf stepped forward. "I answer that every action I took was in service to this pack's survival. The deaths at Southern Pass, tragic as they were, prevented thousands more in prolonged conflict. My strategies created the stability we enjoy today." His voice carried absolute conviction. "I do not deny the accusations. I embrace them. What I did was necessary. I made hard choices, so others did not have to." "Lieutenant Frost, approach and provide testimony." Elara moved forward, aware of every eye tracking her. "State your name and position." "Lieutenant Elara Frost, commander of the Southern Pass garrison, currently military advisor to King Theron Stone." "Describe what happened 20 years ago." She pulled memories from sealed places. "We held Southern Pass for 6 months against superior forces. Our position was strong, our troops well-trained. We should have maintained indefinitely." Her voice remained clinical. "But we received contradictory intelligence. Supply shipments that never arrived, reinforcements delayed for reasons that made no strategic sense." "Continue." "On the final night, we prepared for assault from 3 directions, but the 4th direction, where General Demon's forces provided support, remained empty. We were surrounded, cut off. When I sent runners to find our reinforcements, they reported Demon's troops had withdrawn to secondary positions." The room erupted in whispers. "What happened next?" "We fought for 12 hours. But without support, the position became untenable. Queen Isolde, my mother, ordered fighting retreat through escape tunnels. She remained behind with 100 volunteers to buy time." Elara's voice cracked. "They died so we could escape. All of them." "And you blame General Demon?" "I blamed whoever gave the order to abandon our flank. I assumed it was strategic error." She met Kavos's gaze. "I never imagined someone had forged orders, that 500 deaths were acceptable currency for political ambitions." Kavos smiled that cold smile. "You still do not understand, Lieutenant. Those 500 deaths prevented 5,000. The Eastern Territories were collapsing. I accelerated the inevitable and ensured we controlled the outcome." "You murdered my garrison." Her voice was steel. "Not to prevent greater death, but because it was convenient." The chamber erupted, wolves demanding execution, others calling for investigation. Theron raised his hand for silence. "Elder Cassius, you were present. What is your testimony?" The old warrior rose, leaning on his cane. "I fought beside Queen Isolde's forces. I saw the contradictory orders, the missing supplies, the reinforcements that never came." He pointed at Kavos. "And I saw you in the command tent, reviewing dispatches, speaking privately with communication officers." "That proves nothing," Kavos countered. "I was a War Council member. I had access to battlefield communications." "You had access to forge them." Cassius's voice was iron. "And motive. You wanted the Eastern Territory absorbed. You sacrificed anyone who stood in the way." "I sacrificed a few to save many. That is what leaders do." "No," the old warrior's voice rang clear. "That is what tyrants do." For the next hour, Scholar Lyra presented forensic evidence, handwriting analysis, ink composition, paper dating, a methodical dissection of Kavos's deception. When she finished, Theron looked to the assembled council. "You have heard testimony, seen evidence. What say you?" A senior elder rose. "We find the evidence compelling, but we must ask, did the accused act alone?" All eyes turned to Morgana. She stood, composure perfect despite the weight of attention. "My brother is under investigation. I'm conducting that investigation personally. If evidence of his knowing participation exists, I will present it regardless of personal cost." Her voice hardened. "But I will not condemn him based on association alone. He followed orders he believed legitimate." "And your own involvement?" another elder demanded. "Judge me by my actions." Morgana's eyes flashed. "I have spent 15 years building stability from war's chaos. Every decision I have made has been subject to council review. Judge me by what I have done, not by association with a traitor." Silence. Theron looked to Kavos one final time. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" The elder met his gaze without flinching. "I regret nothing. I would make the same choices again. You call me traitor. I call myself realist. History will determine which of us was right." "History is written by survivors." Theron's voice was cold. "Elder Kavos, by decision of this council, you are found guilty of conspiracy, treason, and murder. You will be held until sentence can be properly carried out." No gasps, only grim acceptance. Guards moved to escort Kavos to confinement. As he passed Elara, he paused. "I am sorry about your mother, Lieutenant. She was a fine leader." His expression was almost gentle. "But she would have failed regardless. The Eastern Territories were doomed. I simply ensured their fall served a purpose." "The only thing you ensured was that 500 soldiers died believing their sacrifice mattered." Her voice was quiet but sharp. "That is not strategy. That is evil wearing strategy's clothes. Perhaps, or perhaps in 20 years you will understand." Then he was gone. The chamber slowly emptied. Elara remained, exhausted by testimony and memory. Cassius approached carefully. "You did well, child." "I did what was necessary. That is not the same as doing well." "It rarely is." His weathered hand gripped her shoulder. "But you gave them truth. That matters." Before she could respond, Finn approached urgently. "Lieutenant, border scouts report the Southern Coalition has halted their advance 30 miles from our defensive line. They are establishing fortified positions." "Fortified?" That was unexpected. "Armies seeking conquest do not stop to dig in." "Yes, defensive earthworks, artillery positions. They appear to be preparing for prolonged encampment." Elara exchanged glances with Cassius, then looked for Theron. The king was speaking with Morgana, but he noticed her attention and approached. "The coalition has stopped, 30 miles out, building fortifications." "Why halt when they have momentum?" "Because they are waiting for something, or they want us to attack their fortified position." Her mind raced. "This is not about conquest. This is about forcing us into mistakes." "Then we wait, maintain our positions. Or we use this opportunity." She held his gaze. "They have established a static position. That makes them predictable. I can get close, observe, learn what they are truly planning." "That was not the plan. You were to go in the morning under flag of truce." "Plans change. Right now I can approach during confusion of establishment. By morning they will be organized, alert. The window closes with every hour." Theron looked at Finn. "Your assessment, Captain?" "The lieutenant is correct, but the risk increases substantially." "Then I do not get caught." Elara's tone allowed no argument. "I have survived 20 years by being invisible. One night in enemy territory is well within my capabilities." The king studied her, conflict evident. "You have until dawn." Finn maintains distance for observation only. If you are compromised, he extracts if possible. If not, he reports. His voice hardened. "And Lieutenant, I will be extremely displeased if you die on this mission." A faint smile touched her lips. "I will make every effort to avoid disappointing your majesty." "See that you do." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Elara." The use of her first name made her pause. "Your mother gave her life so you could survive. Honor that by coming back alive." The words settled over her like a vow. "I will." Hours later, Elara moved through forest that had grown familiar over decades. Midnight found her approaching the ridge overlooking the coalition camp. 12,000 troops spread across the valley, hundreds of fires, artillery positions, supply wagons and defensive squares. This was an army prepared for sustained campaign. But seeing them arrayed below changed perspective. These were not desperate wolves. These were professional soldiers executing carefully planned operations, which raised the question Kavos had never adequately answered. Where had they come from? She settled into concealment, cataloging what she saw. Then she moved. The perimeter sentries were well positioned but predictable. She used terrain like an instrument. Every depression and shadow became part of her approach, moving when attention swung away, freezing when it returned. Hours passed as she covered hundreds of yards. By the time the moon reached its apex, she had penetrated to the inner security ring, close enough to hear conversations from the command tent. Voices drifted clearly. "The northern pack will not attack. Their king is too cautious." A pause. "We wait. Let them make mistakes born of uncertainty." "And if they send emissaries?" A younger voice. "We receive them courteously, provide reasonable answers without revealing true objectives. The timing remains critical. 48 hours. The signal will come from within their territory. When their defenses are compromised from inside, we strike with overwhelming force." Ice formed in Elara's veins, signal from within, compromised from inside. Kavos had not been working alone. She needed to hear more, but instinct screamed warning. Behind her, a twig snapped. She turned, already moving, but too late. A wolf materialized from darkness, shifting mid-leap. His hand closed around her throat. "We have a spy." Guards poured from the command tent. Within seconds, she was surrounded. A man emerged, tall, powerfully built, cold eyes. "Bring her inside." They dragged her before a map-covered table. The commanding wolf circled slowly. "Who are you?" She remained silent. "Search her." They found the knife, found nothing else. No identification, dark clothing without insignia. He crouched to her eye level. You are either very good or very foolish. Elara met his gaze. I am an emissary from King Theron Stone. I came seeking information about your intentions. Laughter rippled through the wolves. Emissaries announce themselves. They do not infiltrate in darkness. He stood. You are a spy, and spies are executed. I am Lieutenant Elara Frost of the Eastern Territories, former commander of Southern Pass. I came seeking whether negotiation remains possible. The laughter died. Every wolf stared with expressions ranging from shock to hatred. The commander's eyes narrowed. Winter's Blade, we thought you died. I survived. Which makes you valuable or dangerous? Perhaps both. He moved to the map table. But perhaps we can reach accommodation. You want information, I want information, an exchange. What do you want to know? How did you survive? Who helped you? Why hide for 20 years? Questions she had answered too many times, but she needed him talking. My mother bought time for retreat. 100 stayed behind while the rest escaped through tunnels. She kept her voice level. Most died in the forest. I survived because I knew terrain and had discipline to move slowly, to hide rather than run. And the 20 years? I was 18. Traumatized. I had watched everyone die. I wanted no part of war. She met his gaze. So I became invisible, built a life that demanded nothing except obedience. He studied her, almost believable, but I think there is more. I think you were placed, gathering intelligence for 20 years. Think whatever you wish. The truth is simpler. Perhaps, he gestured to officers, secure her, comfortable confinement. She may prove useful. Before they could take her, Elara spoke. Why did you stop 30 miles from northern positions? Why fortify instead of pressing your advantage? The commander smiled. Because we are not the main attack, Lieutenant. We are the distraction. The words hit like blows. Distraction. The real threat was coming from another direction, from inside. Who are you working with? That would be telling. But you will learn in 46 hours when everything your king believes about security proves to be illusion. They dragged her to a smaller tent, chained her wrist to a support pole. Secure but not cruel. The guard left. One remained outside. Elara assessed her situation with combat calm. She was captured, but alive, in possession of critical intelligence. Demon was a traitor coordinating with the coalition. They planned sabotage in 46 hours. She needed to escape. Hours passed. She tested bonds, studied the tent's construction, listened to camp routines. Near dawn, footsteps approached. The tent flap opened. 3 figures entered. The commander, a young wolf, and General Demon Silverclaw. He looked older, lines suggesting years of burden. But his presence here told her everything. Lieutenant Frost. His voice carried genuine regret. I am sorry it came to this. You are the traitor, working with them all along. Not all along, only these past 6 months. After Kavos explained what was truly necessary. He moved closer, after he showed me what strength requires. Kavos awaits trial for conspiracy and murder. I know. His arrest accelerated our timeline, but did not change the objective. Damon's expression remained neutral. The Northern Pack must be weakened, restructured. By betraying your oath? By doing what leadership requires when official channels are corrupted by weakness. He gestured to the commander. Supreme Alpha Ragnar and I have been planning this for months. When the moment comes, transition will be swift, casualties minimal. You speak of killing your own people as logistics. Because it is logistics. 3,000 deaths now prevent 30,000 later. His eyes were haunted but determined. I know you understand, Lieutenant. You made similar calculations at Southern Pass. I made no such calculations. My people were murdered by forged orders. Kavos's methods were extreme, but his vision was sound. He crouched. The world changes. Within a generation, we will be discovered. We must be strong enough to fight for survival, not scattered across weak alliances. So you betray everything you swore to protect. I protect the future, even if the present must suffer. Ragnar spoke. Philosophical debates are entertaining but irrelevant. What do we do with Lieutenant Frost? Kill her, the young wolf suggested. No. Demon's response was immediate. She is too valuable. When the new order is established, we will need warriors of her caliber. Assuming she can be convinced, Ragnar studied Elara. What would it take, Lieutenant? Nothing. There is no cause worth betraying your own people. Even if refusal results in worse outcomes? Demon pressed. Elara looked at him directly. You want to know the difference between necessary sacrifice and murder? Intent. I did not orchestrate my garrison's destruction. I fought to prevent it. You chose this. You coordinated with enemies. That is not sacrifice. That is treason." Silence settled. Finally Ragnar spoke. Inspiring words, but words change nothing. He turned to Damon. "We move in 40 hours. Can your people execute their assignments?" "They can. Water supply, armory, communications, all compromised simultaneously. Your forces attack while defenses are crippled." Damon's voice was steady. "King Theron will surrender or watch his pack slaughtered." "And your sister?" "Believes I am innocent, suspects nothing." Pain flickered across his face. "When this is over, she will understand." "Perhaps." Ragnar moved toward the exit. "Secure the prisoner, double the guard. If she escapes, our timeline becomes complicated." They left. Elara tested her chains again. Still secure. Breaking free would require transformation. But shifting here, surrounded by enemy wolves, meant death. She needed another option. Hours crawled past as the camp woke to morning routines. Through it all, Elara maintained stillness, waiting. Near midday, opportunity arrived. A young woman slipped inside with water and bread, moving with efficient silence, setting provisions within reach without meeting her eyes. As she turned to leave, Elara spoke quietly. "You are not coalition, your scent is wrong." The servant froze. "I am Northern Pack, captured 3 months ago. They use me for labor." "What is your name?" "Mira." "Mira, I am Lieutenant Elara Frost. I need to get a message to King Theron." The girl's eyes went wide. "Winter's Blade. I need you to find a wolf named Finn, captain of the King's Guard. He will be watching from the northern ridge. Tell him, Demon is the traitor. He coordinates with the coalition. They plan sabotage in 40 hours. Can you do this?" Fear and hope warred on Mira's face. "The guards will know. They will kill me." "They will kill you eventually. Prisoners are liabilities." Elara held her gaze. "But if you do this, you will have done something that matters, something that saves lives." The girl stood trembling. Then she nodded. "Tonight, after watch change, I will try." "Do not try. Do." Elara's voice carried conviction. "And Mira, thank you." The servant left without another word. Now came the hardest part. Waiting, trusting that a frightened girl would find courage, trusting that Finn remained in position. Night fell with agonizing slowness. Near midnight, she heard it. Brief commotion at the perimeter. Shouts, running footsteps, then pursuit crashing through forest. Mira had made her attempt. The guard outside her tent had reacted, attention fixed on the disturbance, his back partially turned. Elara took a breath, centered herself, made a choice that could not be unmade. She transformed. The change was agony, bones reshaping, but this time she did not fight it. She let the wolf emerge fully. Golden fur, powerful frame. The chains shattered under Lupine's strength. The guard turned at the sound. His eyes went wide. He raised his crossbow, but she was already moving, jaws closing around the weapon, ripping it from his hands. She slammed him against the tent pole, heard wood break and consciousness flee. Then she was outside, in full view of a camp now very aware of her presence. She ran, not toward the perimeter where Mira had fled, the opposite direction, toward the command area where no one would anticipate a prisoner fleeing deeper. Through the gap between wagons, up and over, into chaos. She used their confusion, moved through shadows between fires, a golden ghost appearing and vanishing before weapons could target. The outer perimeter loomed, sentries facing inward. She hit the line at full sprint, went through 2 guards, felt claws rake her flank, but pain was distant. Then she was in the forest. In darkness and terrain she understood, running, mile after mile. They pursued, a dozen wolves coordinating their hunt. But she was Winter's Blade. She used streams to break scent, doubled back, climbed rocky areas leaving no tracks. Dawn found her exhausted but alive, 10 miles from the coalition camp, unable to transform back. But she forced it anyway, collapsed wearing shredded clothing and blood from minor wounds, unable to move. If coalition pursuers found her now, she lacked strength to fight or flee. Footsteps approached. She tried to rise, failed, managed to reach her knees before her body gave up. A figure emerged. Finn. He carried Mira over his shoulder, unconscious but breathing. "Lieutenant." Relief flooded his voice. "We need to move. They are close behind." "Cannot, no strength." "Then I carry you both." He set Mira down carefully and lifted Elara. "My king gave orders. Return with you or do not return at all." He ran, full sprint carrying 2 adults, guard training refusing to accept impossibility. They crossed into northern territory as sun broke over the horizon. Coalition pursuers reached the boundary and stopped. Finn did not slow until the first garrison outpost. Guards took the wounded with efficiency, provided water and blankets, sent runners ahead. Elara drank, let them bandage wounds. But her mind was already moving forward, to 40 hours remaining before sabotage and attack. She had survived. Now she needed to ensure everyone else did the same. King Theron arrived within the hour. He took one look at Elara, and something cracked in his expression. "You were supposed to observe, not infiltrate." "Plans changed. I learned what we needed." Her voice was hoarse. "Demon is the traitor. He coordinates with Supreme Alpha Ragnar. Synchronized attack in 40 hours. Sabotage followed by full assault." Theron absorbed this like a death sentence. "You are certain?" "I heard him discussing it with Ragnar. Saw him in their camp coordinating." She met his gaze. "Your general is going to destroy us from within unless we stop him." "Morgana will never believe without proof." "Then we get proof or act without her consent." Elara struggled upright. "Every hour we debate is an hour closer to sabotage. I cannot arrest a senior general based solely on intelligence from a mission that violated protocol." "Then what do you propose?" "We watch him. If he moves to execute sabotage, we intercept. We gather evidence Morgana cannot deny." "And if we are too slow?" "Then we adapt." His expression hardened. "This is me making a decision with incomplete information. We gather proof carefully, and trust Morgana's investigation reveals truth before timeline expires." Elara wanted to argue, but she recognized the weight of politics she had escaped by becoming invisible. "As you command." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You risked everything to bring us this warning. That will not be forgotten." His voice softened. "Rest now. 4 hours. Then we plan." "There is no time. There is always time for what sustains us." His grip tightened. "You are no good to me dead from exhaustion." She nodded slowly. Finn led her to quarters, real quarters, clean bed, water and food waiting. 4 hours, he said firmly. "I will wake you. Until then, nothing happens without your input." She collapsed onto the bed, should eat, should drink. Instead, she fell into sleep like drowning. She woke to Finn shaking her shoulder. 4 hours as promised. The War Council awaits." She dressed quickly, forced down food, then followed Finn to where commanders had assembled. Theron stood at the map table. "Lieutenant Frost brings intelligence that changes everything. The coalition force is 12,000 strong, professional troops, but this is not their main effort. This is diversion." He gestured for her to continue. "The real attack comes from inside. Coordinated sabotage of water, armory, and communications. Timed for 36 hours from now. When infrastructure is crippled, the coalition attacks from the south." "How do you know this?" a general demanded. "Because I heard General Demon discussing it with Supreme Alpha Ragnar, in the coalition command tent where Demon had traveled to coordinate." Shock, denial, angry voices. Theron raised his hand. "All critical infrastructure receives triple guard. Anyone attempting unauthorized access will be detained. Demon remains confined until Lady Morgana completes investigation." "You confine a general based on the word of someone who hid for 20 years? Hostile challenge. "The proof is that she risked her life to bring warning." Cassius's voice cut through tension. "She infiltrated enemy territory, escaped through 12,000 hostiles. That is not deception." Before argument could escalate, the guard entered. "Your Majesty, incident at Western Water Facility. 2 workers unconscious. Poison introduced into supply." The room erupted. Theron's voice cut like a blade. "Secure all water sources. No one drinks until supplies are verified. Lieutenant Frost, with me. Execute emergency protocols." They ran to the facility. 2 workers lay unconscious, shattered container nearby. Scholar Lyra was examining the substance. "Wolfsbane derivative, modified for delayed reaction." She looked up. This required sophisticated chemistry. How much supply was contaminated? "Unknown." The workers interrupted before completion. She gestured. "We need to drain and flush everything." "That takes days." "Better than troops poisoned." Theron's voice was steel. "Execute the flush. Establish emergency sources. Find who did this." Lyra's fingers moved across documents with that practiced efficiency Elara had noted before. Too practiced. "The workers saw someone fleeing toward the eastern quarter," a guard reported. Understanding crashed down. "Multiple agents throughout the pack structure. We fortify critical sites." Elara marked locations on a map. "Watch who attempts access. Detain anyone unexpected." "That is martial law." "That is survival." Her voice carried 20 years of truth. "We either accept reality or die when trust proves false." Theron looked at his commanders. Execute Lieutenant Frost's plan. Secure critical sites. Detain anyone suspicious. The next 30 hours were nightmare. Explosives discovered in the armory, sabotaged communication equipment, contaminated food stores. Each discovery revealed new conspiracy depth, and Damon remained silent, refusing cooperation until Morgana came. She entered his quarters alone. "Tell me it is not true." He looked at her with regret but not shame. "I did what was necessary." "Courage?" She laughed bitterly. "You call treason courage?" "I call it vision." He stood. Someone needed to make hard choices. Morgana's hand moved. The slap echoed. "Father was twice the man you will ever be." "Father was weak, like Theron. You are no longer my brother. You are simply another enemy." She left without waiting. Outside, Theron waited. "You heard?" "Every word." Her face was hollow. "He admits everything. No remorse." She straightened. "He kept records, coded, in his personal effects. I can decrypt them, find remaining agents." "How long?" "Until tomorrow evening." The attack came 30 hours later, not 36. The coalition had accelerated when they realized their conspiracy was exposed. Dawn broke over prepared defenders, northern wolves in fortified positions, artillery ready, medical stations established. Elara stood on the forward platform beside Theron, officers coordinating final preparations. "They will hit us with everything," she said quietly. "Overwhelming force designed to break lines before we adapt." "Can we hold?" "For a time. Maybe long enough for them to realize this is not easy victory." She looked at him. "But it will cost. 6,000 casualties with sabotage partially successful. 6,000 dead. Or we surrender. Allow Ragnar and Demon to install whatever leadership they believe necessary." She paused. "Those are the choices. Then we fight." The coalition appeared on the horizon as sun climbed, 12,000 wolves in coordinated formation, advancing with inevitability. Artillery spoke first, northern positions targeting to disrupt, but the coalition had heavy weapons, counter-battery fire turning defenses into storms. Then they were close, wolves shifting and charging, chaos of combat where courage meant everything and nothing. Elara called adjustments, directing fire, making 1,000 small decisions determining who lived and died. Beside her, Theron did the same. The coalition hit like a tsunami. Northern wolves fought with desperate courage, holding ground that would likely become graves. And in the chaos, Elara saw it. The pattern. The coalition push was too coordinated, too precisely focused on weak points. They still had intelligence from inside. "There," she pointed. "They know our deployment. Someone is still feeding information." "Who? We detained everyone suspicious." "Not everyone." Her mind raced. Someone with access to command decisions, someone present during planning. Her eyes widened. Communication officers. Lyra said sabotage showed sophisticated knowledge. "Scholar Lyra," Theron breathed. She had access to everything. "Where is she now?" "Communication center, coordinating information flow." They ran. Through corridors, upstairs, to the nerve center of their defense. Inside, Lyra stood over equipment, encoding messages, the picture of efficient coordination, until she saw them. Then her expression flickered. "Your Majesty, how can I assist?" "By telling us who you really serve." Theron blocked the door. "How long have you been Kavos's agent?" "I do not know what you mean." 20 years. Elara moved to flank her. "You were Eastern Territory, one of the survivors. Kavos recruited you, positioned you where you could access intelligence." She studied the woman. "You fed information that got my garrison killed. Now you are doing it again." Lyra was silent. Then she smiled, cold, empty, guilty. "Though not for reasons you assume." She gestured. "I serve neither Kavos nor the Northern Pack. I serve the ideal of what we could become if we stopped dividing along arbitrary pack lines. So you betray everyone equally. I remove obstacles to unity." Her hand moved towards something. Theron was faster, caught her wrist. "You will stand trial." "I will stand for progress." Guards dragged her away, calling back. "You have bought time, Lieutenant, but the coalition still outnumbers you. Your death is delayed, not prevented." Elara turned to the equipment, studied what Lyra had been encoding. She was right about numbers, but wrong about outcome. She looked at Theron. "We cannot win holding current positions, but we can win by making them overextend." "Explain." "They think they have perfect intelligence. What if we feed them different intelligence through captured channels?" Her mind raced. "Make them believe we are weaker. Draw them into committing to a breakthrough that does not exist. That requires them to trust the intelligence. They have trusted it so far." She moved to maps. "Here, This section. We make it look vulnerable. Pull back key units but leave enough to maintain illusion. When they commit, we hit the flanks with everything held in reserve. Theron studied the plan, saw risks, saw potential. If it fails, we lose our reserve. We have nothing left. And if it succeeds, we destroy their forward elements and force defensive posture. She met his gaze. It is risk either way. Question is which risk you can accept. He looked at her, then nodded. Execute it. The next 6 hours were deception made art. Northern wolves retreating in staged panic, positions appearing to collapse, all calibrated to look like real failure. The coalition took the bait. They committed reserves, pushed hard into apparent breakthrough, advanced with confidence of victory within grasp, and walked into prepared positions where northern wolves waited. The battle turned in 20 minutes. Coalition forces trapped. Their momentum became vulnerability. Ragnar called retreat, pulled back to fortified camp, accepted that easy victory was impossible. Northern wolves held position, tended wounded, survivors of battle that cost 3,000 lives but preserved the pack. As night fell, Elara stood on the platform one final time, exhausted, bloodied, victorious in the hollowest sense. Theron approached. We survived. Some of us. Her voice was hollow. 3,000 did not. Thanks to your deception, 3,000 more lived who would have died. It is everything and nothing combined. She looked at the field where bodies were being gathered. In the morning, Ragnar will likely request parley, actual negotiation. And Damon, the remaining conspirators? Face justice, public trial, but also mercy where appropriate. Some were manipulated. You sound like a queen. I sound like someone who has seen too much death. She turned to face him. Your pack needs rebuilding, trust restored. That is work for politicians, not warriors. And where does that leave you? Serving in whatever capacity proves useful. She allowed a faint smile, though hopefully with fewer floors to scrub. I had other positions in mind. The pack needs a military commander who understands modern warfare, who commands respect through proven capability. He held her gaze. I am offering you command of Northern military forces, full authority over training, deployment, and strategic planning. The weight settled over her. That is not a position, that is a burden. Yes, but one I believe you can carry, one that will save lives when the next crisis comes. There will always be another crisis, which is why I need you. His voice softened. I am not asking you to return to war. I am asking you to help prevent it. Elara looked out over the battlefield one more time, at costs paid, at future uncertain, at choice offered. She could refuse, disappear into anonymity, let others carry burdens. Or she could accept, take up the mantle abandoned 20 years ago. I accept. The words felt like verdict and vow. On one condition. Name it. No more secrets. If we build something new, we build it on truth. That includes your father's guilt, my mother's sacrifice, Kavos' conspiracy. All enters public record. Theron nodded. Agreed, though it will not be easy. Nothing worthwhile is. She extended her hand. To truth and rebuilding, to never forgetting what costs were paid. He took her hand, grip firm. To the future we choose. Around them, the pack began rebuilding, tending wounded, burying dead, and in the distance the coalition camp began breaking down. Ragnar accepting invasion had failed. The war was over before it truly began, but the work of preventing the next one had only just started. 3 days after the battle, Elder Kavos stood before a stake in the public square. The entire pack assembled to witness justice rendered. He faced execution with the same cold certainty he had maintained throughout. No fear, no regret, only conviction that history would vindicate him. Theron stood before him, face grave. Elder Kavos, you have been found guilty of conspiracy, treason, and murder, of orchestrating the fall of Southern Pass, of manipulating events for personal vision without regard for lives destroyed. Do you have final words? Kavos looked at the assembled pack, at faces showing fear and anger and betrayal. I have this. His voice carried clearly. Everything I did was calculated to ensure your survival, to make you strong enough for challenges ahead. You may kill me, but you cannot kill the necessity that drove my actions. Someday, perhaps too late, you will understand. We understand perfectly. Elara stepped forward, standing beside her king. We understand that you valued your vision over human lives, that you made yourself judge of who deserved to survive, that you played God with people who trusted you to protect them. She paused. You were not wrong that challenges are coming. You were wrong in believing that betrayal and manipulation are how we face them. Kavas smiled that cold smile one final time. Time will tell, Lieutenant, time will tell. The execution was swift, merciful, more mercy than he had shown his victims. As his body was carried away, Morgana approached Elara. The advisor's face was drawn, aged by grief and betrayal. My brother asks to speak with you before his own execution tomorrow. Why? He will not say, only that he owes you truth before he dies. Elara studied the other woman's face, saw pain that went beyond simple loss. I will see him, briefly. Demon occupied a cell deep beneath the pack house. He looked smaller somehow, weight of consequences stripping away confidence that had marked him. Lieutenant Frost, his voice was hoarse. Thank you for coming. Morgana said you had truth to offer. The truth is simple. I was wrong. He met her gaze. Not about the challenges ahead, not about the need for strength, but about the methods, about believing that betrayal in service of larger purpose was acceptable. That realization comes late. Too late for me, not too late for others. He leaned forward. There are more agents. Kavos recruited dozens over 20 years. Most were never activated. Most do not even know they were recruited. But the potential is there. Hidden. Where? I have written everything I know. Names, locations, methods of recruitment. He gestured to papers on the table. Give this to King Theron. Let him root out remaining conspiracy before it can harm anyone else. Elara took the papers, scanned them, saw names she recognized, wolves who had served faithfully for years. This information could have saved lives if you had provided it earlier. I know. Add that to my list of failures. His expression was bleak. For what little it is worth, I am sorry. For your garrison, for your mother, for all the deaths my actions enabled. I thought I was serving the greater good. I was simply serving my own fear. Fear of what? Of being weak like my father. Of making mistakes that cost lives. Of not being strong enough when strength was required. He laughed bitterly. So I became something worse. A man so afraid of weakness that he embraced evil thinking it was strength. Silence settled between them. Finally, Elara spoke. Your sister will testify against you tomorrow. We'll watch your execution. That is the future you chose. I know, and it is what I deserve. He looked up. But please, tell her I understand now. That I was wrong. That I am sorry. She should not carry guilt for my choices. Tell her yourself. She deserves to hear it from you. She will not come. She said I am no longer her brother, and she is right. Elara studied him, saw genuine remorse warring with arrogance that had brought him here, saw a man who had made terrible choices and would die for them. I will deliver your message. What she does with it is her decision. She left him there, alone with his regrets and approaching death. That night, Theron found her standing on the battlements, looking out over territory preserved through blood and sacrifice. Demon's information is valuable. We will use it to find remaining agents. Remove them carefully. Good. And I have received word from Supreme Alpha Ragnar. He requests formal peace negotiations, acknowledges invasion has failed and seeks diplomatic resolution. Do you trust him? No. But I trust he recognizes continued war serves neither pack. Theron moved beside her. We will negotiate carefully, but peace is better than endless conflict. Even peace built on calculated death counts? Even that, because the alternative is more deaths. He paused. Kavos was not entirely wrong. Difficult decisions are required. The question is whether we make them with eyes open or whether we hide behind justifications. Elara nodded slowly. Tomorrow, Demon dies, the last direct participant in Kavos's conspiracy. After that, we begin rebuilding. We, Theron repeated. I notice you say we now, not they. I accepted your offer. That makes their future my responsibility. She looked at him. Though I reserve the right to remind you this was your idea when things become difficult. A faint smile touched his lips. Noted and appreciated. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two survivors beginning the long work of ensuring past sacrifices meant something. Below them, the pack settled into evening routines. Healing, rebuilding, learning to trust again. It would take time, years perhaps, but time was what they had won. Dawn came too quickly. Demon faced his execution with dignity, spoke briefly to express regret, looked once at Morgana, who stood with face carved from stone, then died as he had lived, a soldier following through on choices made. The pack witnessed, remembered, and slowly began moving forward. Elara watched from her position beside the king, wearing the uniform of her new rank. carrying weight of responsibilities she could no longer avoid. When it was over, when the crowd dispersed, Cassius approached. The old warrior moved carefully, age and injury taking toll. "You did well, child. Your mother would be proud." "My mother would be horrified by the costs." "She knew costs. Paid them willingly so you could be here." His weathered hand gripped her shoulder. "Do not dishonor her sacrifice by believing it was wasted. You are exactly where you need to be. And if I fail, if more die because of my decisions, then you carry that burden the way all leaders carry it, with humility and determination to do better." He paused. "That is all any of us can do. Make best decisions possible, accept consequences, learn from mistakes, try again." Simple wisdom from decades of service. Elara nodded slowly. "Thank you, Elder, for standing witness, for supporting me, for being the moral center this pack needed. I did what duty required, as do you." His grip tightened briefly. "Now go. Your king awaits. Much work remains." She found Theron in his study. Maps spread across every surface, reports stacked high, the endless business of governance. He looked up as she entered. "Supreme Alpha Ragnar has agreed to withdraw all forces to original boundaries. He will pay reparations for damages, and he will publicly acknowledge invasion was unprovoked." "That is more than I expected." He saw his army broken, saw his conspiracy exposed. Theron gestured to maps. "But make no mistake, this is breathing room, not permanent peace. He will rebuild, plan better, wait for better opportunity." "Then we make certain better opportunity never comes. We strengthen alliances, train our forces, build intelligence networks that cannot be compromised." She moved to the maps. "And we remember lessons paid for in blood." "Agreed." He looked at her directly. "I know you never wanted this. Leadership, responsibility. Return to the life you spent 20 years escaping. If you wish to withdraw your acceptance, I will understand." "No." The answer came without hesitation. "My mother bought me life with her sacrifice. I have spent 20 years hiding from that gift, trying to pretend I could be someone other than what war made me." She met his amber gaze. "But Cassius is right. I am exactly where I need to be, and I will not dishonor my mother by running again." "Then welcome, Commander Frost. May your tenure be long and peaceful." "Peace is not given. It is earned." She allowed herself a faint smile. "We will earn it, one day at a time, until the pack our parents died defending becomes the pack their sacrifice deserved." Theron extended his hand, not king to subject, not commander to subordinate, but partner to partner. "To the pack we build together." She took his hand, grip firm, vow sealed, "to remembering the cost of what we preserve, and never forgetting who paid it." Outside, the pack continued its work of healing and reconstruction. The long road ahead stretching toward horizon that held both promise and uncertainty. But for now, in this moment, they had survived. They had faced betrayal and invasion and conspiracy that spanned decades. They had lost much but preserved more. And in the preservation, in the determination to build something better from ruins, lay the seeds of future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. Elara Frost, once servant, once warrior, now commander, stood at her king's side and faced that future with eyes open to both costs and possibilities. The war was over. The work had just begun, and she was ready. The end.